In an era obsessed with perfection, flawless lives, definitive answers, and relentless productivity, how do we find wisdom and, more importantly, a little peace? We pressure ourselves to be the best at everything, to have all the answers, to never fail. But real life is much messier, imperfect, full of contradictions, isn't it? What if I told you that one of the most human and charming philosophers in history, the Frenchman Michel de Montaigne, back in the 16th century, already offered us a revolutionary path, the art of finding wisdom and tranquility precisely by embracing our imperfection instead of fighting against it? Today, we will discover with Montaigne his art of living appropriately, that is, living properly, and how this can be the key to a more serene and authentic life, even and especially amidst the chaos and our failures. Who was Michel de Montaigne, the inventor of the essay, a wise friend to our humanity? Michel de Montaigne was born in 1533 in France during a time of great cultural effervescence, the Renaissance, but also much turbulence, such as the bloody religious wars between Catholics and Protestants. He was a nobleman, a jurist, a politician, but his greatest contribution to us was as a writer and philosopher. The Retreat to the Tower and the Essays. After a public career and the loss of his best friend, Etienne de la Boétie, an event that deeply marked him, Montaigne withdrew to the library in his tower in the family castle. And there, he began to do something completely new for the time. He began to write about himself, about his thoughts, his readings, his experiences, his doubts, his weaknesses, his tastes. He called these writings essays, essais, which in French means attempts, experiments, trials. Montaigne's style, intimate conversation with the reader. And what wonderful attempts! The essays are not systematic and dry philosophical treatises. They are like an intimate conversation, full of digressions, quotes from classical authors, personal anecdotes, with an impressive honesty and self-observation. He paints himself with all his warts to try to understand not only himself, but the human condition in general. He invites us to think along with him. Montaigne is, in many ways, a wise friend who speaks to us across the centuries, showing us that our most intimate anxieties are not so different from his own. Que sais-je? The humility of doubt. At the center of Montaigne's thought is a fundamental question, which he adopted as his personal motto and was engraved on a medal he wore. Que sais-je? What do I know? A moderate and constructive skepticism. This is not a paralyzing skepticism that says nothing can be known and that everything is useless. On the contrary, it is a humble and liberating skepticism. It is a constant reminder of our own ignorance, of the limitation of our knowledge, and an invitation to caution against dogmatism, intellectual arrogance, and the absolute certainty that so often lead to intolerance and violence, something he saw a lot of in his time of religious wars. The valorization of doubt and continuous investigation. For Montaigne, doubting is not weakness, but a sign of intelligence and honesty. It is what keeps us open to learning, to reconsidering our opinions, to listening to others. He distrusted those who were too certain about things. Recognizing our internal contradictions, he was a master at pointing out the contradictions within himself and, by extension, within all of us. He would say something like, "We are, I know not how, double in ourselves, so that what we believe we do not believe, and cannot rid ourselves of what we condemn." This honesty about our inconstant and multifaceted nature is profoundly liberating. From this skeptical humility, Montaigne offers us one of his most valuable and, for his time, and perhaps even for ours, most revolutionary lessons: the radical acceptance of our own imperfection. Embracing imperfection, the art of being human. brutal and humorous honesty about oneself. Montaigne doesn't try to portray himself as a perfect sage or a saint. On the contrary, he describes himself in his essays with a disarming honesty, talking about his laziness, his quirks, his fears, his memory lapses, his physical pains, he suffered from kidney stones, and even his bowel habits. For a 16th century nobleman, this was unheard of. We are beings of patches, un pièce de rapport. He saw us as beings made of patches, inconstant, full of contradictions, changing moods and opinions like the weather. I do not portray myself as fixed, I portray myself as moving, he says. Trying to fix oneself in a perfect and immutable image is a recipe for frustration. The liberating consequence? Self-compassion and tolerance. By accepting his own imperfections and his undulating and diverse nature, Montaigne teaches us to have more self-compassion. If I am like this, flawed and contradictory, and still can strive to live well, then perhaps I can be more tolerant and understanding of the flaws and contradictions of others as well. He reminds us with a certain irreverence that kings and philosophers defecate, and so do ladies. A way of saying that deep down, we are all made of the same human stuff, with our basic needs and our imperfections. This levels the playing field and brings us closer. Vivre à propos, living appropriately in ordinary life. So, if we are imperfect and if absolute knowledge is elusive, how do we live well? Montaigne's answer lies in his idea of vivre à propos, which we can translate as living appropriately, living according to one's purpose, living in accordance with oneself, not seeking heroic grandeur or abstract ideals. For Montaigne, the good life is not necessarily found in great heroic deeds, in extraordinary sacrifices, or in the pursuit of abstract and unattainable ideals imposed on us from the outside, whether by religion, dogmatic philosophy, or society. Living well in one's own skin and in ordinary life. The true art of living for him is living well our ordinary daily life, with all its small joys and challenges, according to our own nature and our particular circumstances. It is finding our own pace, our rhythm, and not trying to imitate that of others or follow fleeting trends.
The importance of judgment, practical discernment. To live appropriately, it is essential to cultivate judgment, which for Montaigne is the ability to discern, to ponder, to make good practical choices in the concrete situations of life, using reason, experience, and self-observation. It is not about having all the theoretical answers, but about knowing how to navigate life with good sense and sensitivity. The most glorious masterpiece. Montaigne even says, the greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. And also, our great and glorious masterpiece is to live appropriately. All other things, to reign, to hoard, to build, are, at most, small appendages and accessories. What a lesson in humility and focus on the essential. Sources of wisdom: friendship, books, and conversation. In this journey of living appropriately, amidst imperfection, Montaigne greatly valued some sources of wisdom, comfort, and growth. True friendship, an inestimable treasure. His essay on friendship, where he speaks of his deep relationship with Etienne de la Boétie, is one of the most beautiful texts ever written on the subject. For Montaigne, true friendship, based on affinity of souls, mutual trust, and frankness, is one of life's greatest blessings, a refuge and a mirror where we can see and know ourselves better. Because it was him, because it was I, he says about La Boétie. Books as constant companions. Montaigne was a voracious reader. His library in the Tower was his sanctuary. For him, books were the best provisions for life's journey, silent companions that offer us the wisdom of other eras, console us in difficulties, and help us understand ourselves and the world. He conversed with authors through his readings. The value of honest conversation and exchange of ideas. He also loved a good conversation, the lively exchange of ideas, even with those who thought differently. For him, conversation was a way to exercise judgment, to learn, to get rid of prejudices. He He preferred a well-formed mind to a well-filled mind, and conversation helped to form the mind. Facing mortality, learning to live fully. One of the themes Montaigne approaches with his characteristic honesty is the fear of death. To philosophize is to learn how to die, but in a Montaignian way. He quotes the classic adage that to philosophize is to learn how to die, but for Montaigne, this did not mean living obsessed with death or preparing for an afterlife. It meant first and foremost learning to live well the time we have, without being paralyzed by the fear of the end. Familiarizing oneself with the idea of death to lessen its terror. He believed that by thinking about death, by familiarizing ourselves with its inevitability, we can lessen the terror it inspires in us. It's like looking at something frightening until it becomes less threatening. Not letting the fear of death poison life. The goal is not to be morbid, but to free ourselves from the tyranny of the fear of death, so that we can more fully enjoy life with its joys and sorrows without the constant anguish of the end. If death is certain, then let's live well while we're here. How to apply Montaigne's timeless wisdom in the chaos of our modern life. Practice honest but gentle self-observation. Like Montaigne, set aside moments to observe yourself, to understand your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions, without excessive judgment. Knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. Embrace your contradictions and your imperfection. You don't need to be perfect or always coherent. We are beings of patches. Accept your flaws and your changes as part of your humanity. This brings immense relief. Cultivate intellectual humility. Remember, que sais. Distrust absolute certainties, yours and others. Keep an open, curious mind, willing to learn and reconsider. Value simple joys and ordinary life. Happiness is not just in grand events. Learn to appreciate the small pleasures of everyday life, the beauty of common life. That's where Montaigne found the art of living. Seek genuine friendships and enriching conversations. Invest in relationships that nourish you, where there's trust, frankness, and true exchange. Make books your friends and mentors. Reading expands our mind, our soul, connects us with other experiences and wisdoms. Be more tolerant and compassionate with yourself and others. Remember, we are all learners in this school of life, all imperfect. A little more kindness can make a big difference. Michel de Montaigne doesn't offer us a rigid philosophical system or a set of definitive answers to life's great mysteries. Instead, he offers us something perhaps much more valuable: his wise companionship, his disarming honesty, and an invitation to look at ourselves and life with more curiosity, more acceptance, and less anxiety. He teaches us that the true art of living appropriately is not in achieving superhuman perfection, but in being fully and humanly ourselves, with all our flaws, our doubts, our joys, and our wonders. It is finding wisdom and peace not despite life's imperfection, but through it. What aspect of Montaigne's philosophy touched you most or seemed most useful for your daily life? Do you also feel this pressure for perfection, and how do you deal with your own imperfection? Share your reflections, your discoveries, and your own attempts to live appropriately here in the comments. Let's learn together with this master of self-acceptance. If this conversation with Montaigne brought you a little more peace and wisdom, leave your like. Share this video with everyone you think needs a little more lightness and authenticity in life, and subscribe to the channel for more philosophical dives that help us live better. A big hug, and until next time. Remember, life is a constant essay.